Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra. As always, with James from Good On Blog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
I'm okay. It's just about morning. We're recording just this side of midday. A little later than normal, but we'll get it out there for everybody after what was I think, quite an interesting game at Stamford Bridge yesterday.
It was, yeah. It was probably more of an interesting game than a good game.
Oh, it definitely was not a good game.
A game with not much football, I think Mikel Arteta called it. But yeah, a lot to discuss from it. And I have to say, like, not to sort of, shortcut to the ending straight away, not an outcome I'm particularly disheartened by.
Yeah.
I think a draw away to a team who going into the weekend were your closest challenger. It's not a bad result.
No, I agree with that. But what I would, playing devil's advocate a bit, obviously.
Yeah.
I'll sort of admit that when the final whistle blew at 1-1, I was like, fuck, thank God that's over. I didn't really want to experience any more of it. I thought it was a disgusting, horrible game of football that I didn't really enjoy in any way at all. Even with, Chelsea getting a man sent off. But that's the thing, I guess, that people will say, okay, yeah, on paper, in a difficult week, you go away from home, you take a point. Chelsea were second most of the week. They were overtaken by Man City. But you get a draw away from home against a big team like Chelsea in a London derby. It's not a bad point. And it might well turn out to be a very, very good point come the end of the season. But I guess some people will say the fact that Arsenal played all of the second half and sort of a chunk of the first half against 10 men, it might feel like an opportunity missed in that sense. So I understand it from that point of view. But I will say I'm sort of with you that when the whistle blew, it was like, right, we did not play well today. We didn't do enough to win the game. And let's just sort of park this after what was a very difficult, challenging week, with a North London derby, then a big game against Bayern Munich, then you're away against Chelsea. I think all of the context plays a part in how I felt, certainly at the end of the whistle. Opportunity at the end of the game, rather. Opportunity missed? Yes, I think so. But also, given that we didn't play very well and given that we did look leggy and tired and the game was the way it was for various reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into, a point I can live with it, even if I think, maybe we should be winning that game, given how long Chelsea were playing with 10 men. Yeah. Ordinarily, I mean.
Yeah, no arguments from me on any of that. I just think we have to look at this game in the context of the week. I really think that's vital to recognise that it comes at the end of a really tough run of games, or let's say a really important run of games. Spurs didn't feel too tough on the day, but it's a derby, right?
Yeah.
So it's a big fixture. Then you've got Bayern Munich in the Champions League. We took that very seriously. Got a great win, which really strengthens our belief in Europe and our credentials to win that competition. And then it's Chelsea away, who, as I say, on Friday were our closest challengers in the league. So a huge week. I think 7 points from 9 across 2 different competitions is actually a really good return. I think I would have been pretty happy with that beforehand.
Yeah.
I think that maybe the slight regret people have is that my sense is most people in the fan base, they would have been really happy with that 7 from 9. They might have just swapped where that draw happened.
Absolutely.
Maybe for midweek and Bayern Munich.
Yeah, but you can't pick and choose, unfortunately. And I think as well, there's a lot of physical energy went into those games, the Tottenham game and the Bayern game, but a lot of emotional energy as well. And I think going into this game, the place to start obviously is the team that we put out, and we didn't have Leandro Trossard, who has been in outstanding form of late. So he was missing from the left-hand side. The decision there was to bring in Gabriel Martinelli. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the most striking thing about our team was the absence of William Saliba, who picked up a knock in training. He was there. He was with the squad. He travelled with the team, but couldn't play. They didn't want to risk anything, and we'll wait and see what happens with him. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. But that meant that we had to field a very inexperienced central defensive partnership in Christian Mosquera and Piero Hincapié, which, I don't think is ideal going away from home.
Really, rather than inexperienced.
Well,
in Hincapié's case, plenty of experience.
Yeah, I meant sort of inexperienced in terms of playing together in the Premier League for Arsenal. I didn't mean
absolutely. One game they'd played, I think they played together in
the Carabao Cup, wasn't it?
Against Brighton, that's right.
Yeah.
I played well that night, but this is a very, very different test. And Arsenal are a very different beast, I think, without Gabriel and Saliba. You can't really overplay what a big, important foundation that's been in this team.
No, I think, we have the quality, and we've brought in the quality to be able to deal without one of them pretty well. As we saw this week in the derby against Bayern Munich, there was no Gabriel, but Saliba was there, and it was Hincapié in the derby, and it was Mosquera against Bayern Munich. And, you can cope. I still think you miss something, but you can cope. But when both of them are missing, I think it really does have an impact on how we play and maybe how the opposition play against us. Can you remember what the first thing that happened in the game was? Was
it to do with David Raya?
No.
Oh, go on, tell me. Because my first note is that Raya had a couple of risky moments on the field.
Right.
I don't remember before that.
Kickoff. We have the kickoff. Declan Rice plays the ball back, and João Pedro just runs into Christian Mosquera and sort of puts his two hands in front of his chest and sort of pushes him over straight away, right?
I do remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's similar to, if you remember Erling Haaland doing it a couple of times against Gabriel and Saliba. But I think that's sort of, that I kind of get. These guys are on like the same level kind of thing. Haaland, he's got to put himself about against two of the best central defenders in the world. So he shows, listen, I'm a 6'5" Viking machine. You're going to have to put up with me. In this instance, I can't help but think that when the team sheet came out, that Chelsea decided to sort of amp up what I think was already going to be an aggressive approach to this game. I think they deliberately set out to make life difficult for Arsenal physically, whether they stayed the right side of the line or not. And on a couple of occasions they didn't. And on one particular occasion they definitely didn't. So we'll talk about that. But I'm almost certain that if William Saliba is starting instead of Christian Mosquera, let's say, João Pedro does not target William Saliba in the same way.
I think that's probably right.
So I think I think it hadn't. What I mean to say basically is that absence had an impact on us, and I think Hincapié and Mosquera did pretty well for the most part. But I also think it sort of emboldened Chelsea a little bit to really ramp up what was going to be a physical approach anyway.
Yeah, I think the biggest swing from it may have been psychological for both teams.
Yes, agree.
I think there's every chance Chelsea would have gone quite physical anyway. I think the way they approached the game, I would describe it as Newcastle-esque in the way that they, I think, sought to make it incredibly physical. But yes, I think the absence of Arsenal's bouncers at the back would have given them encouragement in that regard. Now, I don't think, and I think they discovered that Mosquera and Hincapié are not particularly a soft touch. In fact, I think Hincapié looks like the sort of player who absolutely relishes that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And he showed that when he tackled Pedro Neto in the box and just screamed into his face.
Loved that. I really liked that bit, actually. Yes, that was my, beyond our goal, I guess, that was probably my favourite bit of the game.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like Gabriel Heinze may have sort of sired him at some point in South America. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
it's his illegitimate child, and there's definitely a through line there in terms of their attitudes on the pitch. But yeah, obviously Chelsea came out the blocks incredibly physically. The other thing I was struck by, just sort of scanning through the stats now, was the aerial duel numbers, which were massively in Chelsea's favour. Arsenal won 12, Chelsea won 29. Again, I don't know where those happened. Maybe they all happened in the Chelsea penalty area when they were defending in the second half. But it feels like with Gabriel Saliba on the pitch, I don't know, that ratio might have been a bit more balanced.
Yeah, maybe so. So look, that aggressive approach to the game was evident a couple of minutes later as well when Cucurella went through the back of Bukayo Saka and got away without being booked. And then there was like a sort of set two in midfield where I think maybe Rice maybe fouls Caicedo. They get a free kick. Caicedo then pushes Mikel Merino over with two hands right in front of the referee. And then a minute later, because the game within 4 or 5 minutes is threatening to sort of bubble over, Zubimendi gets a yellow card for a foul on Reece James, which I think, you could argue one way or the other. Is it a yellow? Is it not? I think it's hard for me to comprehend how that foul is a yellow card, but the Cucurella one is not. The Cucurella one, for example, felt a bit like, well, it's early in the game. I'll give him a warning. And the referee did have a word with Reece James, who is the assistant referee on the day, you might have noticed. He had a word with him about that tackle with Cucurella, and it didn't take long for Cucurella to get in the book. But I think, it's frustrating, isn't it, as a fan, where you see something that's way more egregious get away without a booking. And Zubimendi, by the letter of the law, is it a booking? Yes, but it's about the way that a referee tries to control the temperature of a game. And this one, I think, was hot from the very start. And once he started giving out yellow cards, then he sort of had to keep doing it, albeit most of those yellow cards went to Arsenal players.
I feel for Zubimendi because I think that's 2 consecutive away games that's happened in. I seem to remember at Sunderland as well. He found himself booked, and it was more a kind of cumulative booking to try and manage the game than necessarily a particularly egregious foul he'd committed. Maybe there is some onus on him as well to kind of sense the temperature and the mood of the referee and maybe tread a bit more carefully in those moments, but it does feel a bit unlucky. I guess the referee is hoping, well, if I book Zubimendi, I've sort of laid down the law and hopefully I bring this game a bit more under control, which I don't think is a completely logic-free approach, but it didn't work. It's safe to say.
No, it didn't. There were other yellow cards. Mosquera picked up a yellow card, I think, in the 13th or 14th minute. Another one of those where he's sort of breaking up a Chelsea break in their half. Cucurella got booked a couple of minutes before that for another foul on Bukayo Saka. Yeah. So, it was tetchy, it was stop-start, it was physical, and, I think in sort of the opening 25, 30 minutes, despite the fact we had maybe 1 or 2 shots, did we? I think Chelsea were probably the better team from an attacking perspective. We could not find any kind of rhythm. And it might be a combination of the physical approach, not being able to build any rhythm in the game, having a bit of an off day as well, which is not beyond the realms of possibility after a couple of really hard games. It can take you a while to get into a game like this. But Chelsea had better moments. There was a really important tackle from Declan Rice in our box. There was a chance for Estevao, if you remember, where I was like, oh, fuck, this is a goal. And he blasted it over the bar, and then Nkapie got caught on the edge of the box, and we got back well enough to defend and snuff out that chance. So I think this was a game that Arsenal really struggled to get hold of in any way until maybe the sending off. How did you view that opening sort of half hour, 35 minutes before the red card? Is there a tactical explanation, or do you think it's just a combination of all of those things, that home team momentum, they played against 10 men in midweek, We played, 11-man Bayern Munich. They played Burnley last weekend. We played Tottenham. Does that sort of add up to maybe Chelsea having a bit more zip in their legs than us?
I think that could be a factor for sure. I mean, they had a big game against Barcelona, but obviously that 24 hours might make a difference. I think the physical approach, as ugly as it was, kind of worked for them. And actually, I mentioned that it sort of reminded me of Newcastle, and Newcastle are one of the teams in the Premier League who've had more success against us playing in that sort of fashion. We saw elements of that physicality from Sunderland too. So I do wonder if that's something we're going to see more and more of. I know we have the physicality to stand up to it. I know we have the presence and the maturity to live with it, but we're so good that I do think people are looking for ways they can tip the advantage in their favour. And the dark arts, which used to be, our proviso, may be one of those ways. I think Chelsea were the better side until the sending off. I think they had those two in particular moments with Esteval blasting over and João Pedro going through after Nkapie sort of got his feet in a bit of a muddle, where I really, really feared they would score. And we didn't quite get going in terms of our attacking play. So, I think the red card was maybe the moment of the game. Completely transformed the fixture, to be honest. And I suppose it showed the danger of the approach Chelsea were taking. They very clearly set out to be physical, to disrupt us. But if you get that wrong, and the officials are doing their job properly, you're going to be in big trouble.
I was doing the live blog yesterday, and about 10 minutes in, I was sort of thinking of just posting an update like, Caicedo is either going to be man of the match or he's going to get a red card. And that was the way I was looking at this. And I think I was distracted. Maybe something happened in the game and I updated that and forgot to post that. It would have been quite prescient based on what happened. And
I can tell you this, as you know, my brother's a Chelsea fan.
Yeah.
He was in the home crowd yesterday and we were sort of texting on the group chat. And he sent me a text message, I think after Caicedo, put in a big crunching challenge, just saying Caicedo is a dream in these games. And within about 8 minutes, he was off the pitch.
He was a nightmare. I mean, you could see that he was completely wound up for this one. And listen, you can channel that kind of passion in a really positive way, right? We've seen that in some of our games this season where you have a player, Eze in the derby, Declan Rice against Bayern Munich, where you can sense that they are so up for this particular fixture, but they channel that in a really positive way. But Caicedo was sort of being given free rein by the referee to do whatever he wanted. I mentioned that moment where he pushed Merino over. About 25 minutes in, Eze picked up the ball in our half and Caicedo came in and just sort of barged into him. And again, two hands just absolutely pushed him over and got away with it. And there was no sanction from the referee in that moment. So I think he probably felt like he could do what he wanted.
Yeah.
And that then transpired in the challenge on Mikel Merino, which is absolutely 100% a red card. And let's just be clear before we talk about this incident. This is a player who has previous in that sense, not sort of a collection of random bad tackles, but it is the same bad tackle all the time. It's that one where he goes slightly high, slightly late, studs up, not like halfway up the leg, but, enough above the ankle for it to be really, really dangerous. And there've been some examples of that in the not too distant past. There was, I'm trying to remember who they were. I put links to them in the blog today. Anthony Gordon was one. There was one on Ryan Gravenberch as well. And I think there was one on a Tottenham player, which I found a link to as well. It is the same bad tackle every time. It's dangerous and it's dirty And the previous 3 times he's got away with it. This time he did not. Mikel Merino spoke on Sky Sports after. He sort of said he was in no doubt that it would be a red card. And he sort of half joked. He said, I've got very mobile ankles. But I think he is lucky that he, at the very last second, sort of saw it coming and was able to just get his legs off the ground, because that is the kind of tackle that can really, really badly hurt a player.
Yeah, it was. And it actually looked pretty horrible even in real time, right? It was like a coming together. You couldn't quite see what the contact was on my TV pictures anyway. And then as soon as you saw the replay, I mean, we'd been joking, hadn't we, on text message about who's going to be sent off in this game, because it felt absolutely inevitable.
You were like, there's your answer.
There's your answer. Yeah. I wonder as well with Caicedo this game, obviously Chelsea were hyped up for it. I think a win would have been absolutely massive for them. A sort of big moment in their development as a team. I wonder as well, like, how aware Caicedo is of the kind of narrative around him and Declan Rice that I've seen in a few places. You know, I mean, undoubtedly they are 2 of the best central midfielders in the league, and I think we all feel like we've got the best one. But I wonder if he was sort of particularly hyped up because it was but then, as you say, he's done it before. Yeah. So maybe I'm making excuses and I don't need to be.
Yeah, well, look, people were maybe critical of the referee in this instance. My sort of understanding is that, you know, while the VAR check is going on as part of the process or protocol, Anthony Taylor gives him a yellow card, and then the VAR is obviously reviewing and telling him to go over. He then rescinds the yellow card and gives him a red card, which he absolutely 100% deserved. I thought as well, by the way, the way he writhed around on the ground afterwards himself was embarrassing. It was just pathetic, because what he was trying to do was make it look like he somehow had been injured and Merino had caught him when that was it was not a 50-50. It was a nasty, dangerous challenge on Merino that could have really, really hurt him. And it's pathetic to see a sort of self-styled hard man. I mean, I guess it goes with the territory. These hard guys are also babies, fucking cowards, really. And that's what he did, was sort of writhe around and pretend to be injured. And then when the referee came over to give him the red card, he's like, what? Me? What the fuck? Like, at least if you're going to be a fucking cunt, own it, you know? Own it. You drives me mad. But, you know, he deserves to get sent off. He deserves a 3-game ban. And as good as he is as a footballer, and he is a really good footballer, that is an aspect of his game that gets completely and utterly underplayed in the media. And I think it's about time people woke up to what a nasty player he is capable of being. On top of all the great things he can do in the game, he's got that. You know, there's a fine balance between being sort of hard and nasty and dangerous. You know, we all know the players that you can think of. But, you know, as I said, it's not a coincidence that all the tackles I've mentioned are exactly the same. And that's like his calling card. And this time he got found out, and he absolutely deserves a red. And more scrutiny, I hope, going forward from referees. Maybe it's a moment where he realizes he can't behave like that on the football pitch, because it's dangerous to opposition players. If he cares about that one way or the other, I don't know. But maybe he cares about not getting sent off. So, you know, the fact that he was pulled up this time might save somebody from a bad injury down the line.
Well, it's cost his team very dear, because, you know, I as I said, I thought they were on top at that point in the game. And everyone's talking about the permutations for the title race from the result of the fixture. But he's also going to miss 3 matches, as you point out. And that could be big for Chelsea. I mean, he's probably, you know, one of their very best players, and he's going to miss 3.5 matches as a consequence of that challenge. So I'm quite right too. It was a bad tackle and as clear a sending off as you'll see. I have to be honest to say there was a tiny part of me that thought, is he going to get away with this? You know, because so much had gone in his favour on the day. Listen, regardless of the outcome yesterday, I don't think Chelsea are ready to win the league. And one of the reasons I believe that is a lack of discipline. And actually, you know, as Arsenal fans, we know plenty about that and the problems it can cause you. Not that we're necessarily accustomed to seeing our players go in with the sort of tackle Caicedo did yesterday, but, you know, Chelsea have now got, I think, 3 red cards this season, 3 or 4. That's basically where we were this time 12 months ago, albeit with very different offences. But I think that lack of cool, that lack of composure, that lack of smarts cost them yesterday and will continue to cost them.
Well, it did cost them, obviously, a man. And it was a moment, I think, that you were looking for Arsenal to really respond and take the game on and take advantage of the 10 men. We'll talk about that in a moment. I mean, the game, by the time it got to halftime, Mosquera, Nkapie and Ricardo Calafiori were on yellow cards. Nkapie, I think it's a jump for the ball. It is one of those where he catches the player and it's a sore one. I don't agree with the contention from the Chelsea side of things that he should have been sent off for that. I think it's one of those, it's an occupational hazard. If you're a defender, you're going to go and arms are going to be up as people are jumping. Sometimes you get caught. And it was unfortunate for Chalobah because it obviously looked like a really sore one. But I don't think it was, certainly wasn't malicious in any way. It was more accidental than anything.
No, it wasn't one of those where he sort of clocks him and swings an elbow, you know?
Yeah.
It was more of one where he has arms. I didn't, Reece James said he felt Nkapie should have been sent off, and I think Enzo Maresca backed it up in the press conference. I didn't see it that way. There was an interesting stat at half-time from Opta Joe. Did you see Arsenal during the first 45 minutes, or first half, because obviously it went slightly longer, only had 2 touches in Chelsea's penalty box.
Right.
And in every other Premier League game, bar one, they've had at least 10.
Right.
Double digits. So it tells you sort of how relatively little threat or how inconsistent a threat we were offering. The other game, by the way, in the league, where it was just 5 touches in the box.
Liverpool?
Crystal
Palace.
Who, have actually given us one of our sterner tests. So that does ring kind of true.
Yes. Okay, well, look, it was half-time and I was concerned about the amount of players on yellows, but it's a difficult situation for Mikel Arteta to try and manage because 3 of those were in the back 4. So he decided to make a change, which was at left-back. Ricardo Calafiori, I thought otherwise was quite good. Got a very, I was screaming at my TV, don't foul.
Super sloppy booking.
Yeah.
He did. I think it was him who recovered very well when Nkapie had that slip on the edge of the box. So I think his all-round game was pretty good.
Just that moment,
Yes. So Mikel, in his wisdom, brought on the human yellow card magnet. Marv's Lewis Skelly.
Honestly, I swear. I mean, I understood the change, but the discussion at halftime must have been, listen, whatever you do, we're bringing you on for a guy who's been booked. And Arteta made it quite clear that because of the threat they had down the right-hand side with Pedro Neto and Malo Gusto and, the tricky players that Calafiori was going to come up against, that was part of why he took Calafiori off. And within 10 minutes, Lewis Skelly gets booked in a very Lewis Skelly way. If the Calafiori one was sloppy, then the Lewis Skelly one is one we've seen a few too many times from him. But of course, before that, Chelsea had scored. This is, I think, an interesting goal to analyse because Arteta said afterwards, he said it on Sky and he said it in his press conference about Chelsea targeting players who are on yellow cards, I assume to try and get them sent off to even up the numbers, right?
Yeah.
What did Chelsea do from kickoff? They play it back to Robert Sanchez. Sanchez pumps it long towards Nkapie, and João Pedro falls on the ground and pretends like Nkapie did something to him. And he's sort of rolling around, holding his face, and they're all going mad, and they're like, look, that was very, very deliberate as well. Really, proper cynical gamesmanship from Chelsea there. Target a guy who's on a yellow, make the referee aware that the guy who's on a yellow might have done something. I don't even think this is a free kick. I do not see what Nketiah has done wrong in this situation. And the referee has bought a piece of play acting from João Pedro. And from there, that's where they get the goal.
Yeah, they go and get the corner. David Raya makes quite a good intervention, I thought, off that free kick. They got in behind, didn't they, at the back post? Who was it? It was João Pedro.
It was João Pedro at the back post, yeah.
Our friend João Pedro. And he makes a save at the near post, then turns it away. They get the corner. Thoughts on this goal? I mean, listen, I'm no Nico Yova, right? So I'm maybe not the man to break it down. I am sort of tempted to say great flat delivery, brilliant header. We've seen, we know ourselves when you have those elements and they combine, it's very difficult, can be very difficult to stop.
What do we say if Arsenal score that goal?
Yeah, I think we're talking about the quality, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is a good delivery.
I've watched it a couple of times, and David Raya sort of gets under the ball. He sort of, he kind of ends up slightly in no man's land, but I don't think he can get there because it's such it's a corner that drops right at the near post. It's almost at that side of the 6-yard box. I just think scoring from that position is incredibly difficult, and whether by luck or great skill, he kind of finds the only point of the net he can.
I suppose, though, if you're looking at it from an Arsenal perspective, you're probably saying, where is the man at the near post who's winning that header? Because that is typically somewhere where we're very strong. And if you remember, when we have someone like Kai Havertz in the team or Victor Gyökeres in the team, that's their job, is to be that front post guy.
Yeah.
And maybe, I'm just looking at it again, it's actually Declan Rice who's there.
He ends closest to him for sure.
Saliba he runs off Timber. Yeah, I mean, like every goal, you can look at it and say, we could do better there. We could.
Of course.
We could defend
and
better.
There's a kind of impossible to quantify thing of, if Gabriel and Saliba are there, what difference does that make in terms of their control and dominance of the penalty area? Even in the set piece before, does that change the way that plays out?
Yeah.
Kind of butterfly effect stuff. But, yeah, I mean, set piece goal for a team with 10 men, it was a dream for them.
Especially the timing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and a bit of a disaster for us. I have to say, actually, although we're talking about the sending off as maybe the pivotal moment in the game, I thought Chelsea made a better fist of playing with 10 than many do, and were pretty well organised and maintained a bit of threat as well. So,
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
Yeah.
But
so it looked like a tall task at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, a tall task, albeit you still have that man advantage, and you have players on the bench who, on paper, can come on and add something to your team from an attacking perspective.
That's true. We didn't talk about that at the top, but, Gabriel Jesus on the substitutes bench, Victor Gyökeres back on the substitutes bench, so Martin Odegaard. So there were plenty of options.
So he brought on Odegaard and Madueke for Martinelli and Zubimendi, and I understood those changes. Martinelli was pretty anonymous. Zubimendi was on a yellow, so you reduce the threat of another player potentially picking up a second yellow card. You drop Rice a bit deeper, and you put Martin Odegaard on. Within a couple of minutes, we get the goal. It's a really good piece of wing play from Bukayo Saka. I also think there's a good piece of defending from Piero Nketiah. Chelsea tried to get down the right-hand side. He read it very well. We recycled the ball from there. It goes out to Bukayo Saka, turns Cucurella, puts in a great cross, and Merino is there. An hour gone, basically, and it's 1-1. You then have half an hour, plus any injury time, to go on and get the other goal, or goals that you need to go and win the game. So I did want to try and unpack those last 30 minutes, because it didn't feel like we were playing 10 versus 11. It really didn't.
It didn't. It really didn't.
I wanted to try and explore maybe why that was. Again, you're trying to come up with all the answers or find the ingredients as to why this was, or why this game played out the way it did. You know, I think we welcomed those players back off the bench, but I also think what we were doing was putting in players who are to varying degrees anyway, rusty because they've spent time out. Gyökeres has been out for a month. Madueke basically out for 2 months, 2.5 months, whatever it was. Odegaard hasn't played since the start of October, really. So you have Gyökeres again. I think I mentioned him. You have players who are obviously capable of giving you something and changing a performance, but maybe not quite at the match fitness level that makes it easy for them to do that, even against 10 men. And I don't want to do it because they're obviously terrible, but do you have to give Chelsea some credit for the way they continue to try and play in this game? Or do we ask questions about ourselves and how is it possible that Chelsea, for example, that moment you mentioned when Nketiah tackles Pedro Neto, which is not long after the goal, and he sort of does the shouting in his face thing. Why is Pedro Neto running through one-on-one with Piero Nketiah in that situation? How are they capable of providing the overloads? I remember thinking maybe Miles could have got back, or if that was a different incident, I'm not 100% sure. No, that was a later incident where maybe we're not getting players back into the right positions quickly enough defensively. So it's a difficult one, isn't it?
It is. I mean, at the risk of being overly simplistic, I do think that last half hour we're playing without any of the triangle of Gabriel, Saliba and Zubimendi on the pitch. And I think that is something which brings real stability to the team. But yeah, it was surprising, I think, how much threat they were able to carry on the break. And in terms of going forward, I just don't think we worked Chelsea as hard as we ought to have done. I saw an interesting tweet from Tim Stillman, actually, who posited that he thought the change, a 70th minute change where Gyökeres came on for Eze wasn't particularly helpful. He felt that we should have persisted more with the kind of all the midfielders option, and there might have been a bit more fluidity and variety in that. And I think that's potentially true, and I think something we did really well against Sunderland was kind of use those positional rotations and quick interplay on the edge of the box. Equally, if Gyökeres gets to that rebound before Robert Sanchez, or indeed Jurrien Timber doesn't take the ball off his head right in the dying moments of stoppage time, I guess the narrative would be wholly different. Of course.
And look, it's one of those where I think, collectively Arsenal weren't at their best. Individually, I think there were players who weren't close to their best either. Eberechi Eze from last Sunday's hero found it difficult to make a mark on this game.
True.
Gabriel Martinelli did not make a mark on this game. Noni Madueke, when he came on, really didn't have any influence at all. And, this would have been a fixture that he was well up for, right? Because of the previous with Chelsea and the way that he was received by the Chelsea fans. So you would have thought he would be absolutely determined to make a mark in this game, but he couldn't do that either. Gyökeres, I get it. You're putting on a striker. You need a goal. So you put on a striker, your big summer signing. He touched the ball twice when he came on. Yeah. That's it in 20 plus minutes. And, it's that balance of, well, as a striker, he needs some service. But if we're playing against 10 men, are we better served with more technical players on the pitch? Players who are more comfortable in possession, who might be able to work those openings in the final third, whereas, Gyökeres is a bit more of a, crack a nut with a sledgehammer guy,
Yeah, he is. And I think if we were a few weeks on, we might have seen Gabriel Jesus, to be honest with you. I think he's the sort of player who in those tight spaces could be really important. But obviously he's barely played since returning from that long layoff. And listen, we have great depth, so much depth that I don't really think we're in a position to make excuses too often about absentees. I think we did miss Leandro Trossard. I think his craft and his kind of ingenuity in the final third is something that we lacked. And particularly when you look at that left-hand side, you've got players in Martinelli and Madueke who are coming back from injury, neither of whom I think performed particularly well in this game. Trossard's been one of our most informed players. So naturally, without him, I think we felt it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We missed, what he can bring, and he's come up clutch a couple of times, hasn't he, in the last few weeks. So, yeah, he was a miss, and Saliba was a miss, and Gabriel was a miss. And I think all of those factors play into, what was a disappointing day, in isolation, I think a disappointing day because we played against 10 men. But going back to what we were talking about at the start, I think this was sort of like the last mile of a marathon or something. It felt like physically we were jaded, mentally we were jaded. It's not for the lack of trying. I didn't see any lack of effort or anything like that. But some days you just can't raise the performance to the level that it was against Bayern Munich or the way that it was against Tottenham. And of course, it would be brilliant to do that because Chelsea, they're just so horrible as a football club and as a group of players. I think I enjoyed this on the Discord. We had a question here which I was going to read out. Let me see if I can find it. It comes from Groninguner, who says, if Arsenal have a no dickheads rule, have Chelsea taken the opposite approach with an only dickheads rule?
Yeah, I mean, that was cemented, wasn't it, when you see Garnacho stripping off to come on, and you're like, wow, there's something about this that just fits. But listen, I think it was a bit of a disappointment to not fully overcome the 10 men and take 3 points that I think would have dealt a huge blow to Chelsea. I think it would have made it 9 between us, and that's some distance at this early stage of the season. But I think when you're not at your best, when things aren't going in your way and the fluidity isn't quite there, don't lose, right?
Yeah,
don't lose. And Arsenal have shown already this season. On the opening day, they set a bit of a template. They went to Old Trafford, didn't play particularly well, and won there. That was massive and gave Arsenal exactly the platform they needed to start their season. I think here was another game where they weren't at their best. We didn't really deliver the performance we might have hoped to, but we didn't suffer a great deal for it. We got a point. We kept the gap with Chelsea as it was, maintained a healthy lead at the top of the Premier League table. And I think that could come to be really, really important. The last thing we needed or wanted was Chelsea and Man City receiving the encouragement of substantially closing that gap.
No.
So
I think another thing maybe to point out is that despite the fact we did get all the yellows, and you look at how early Zubamendi was booked, how early Mosquera was booked, Miles Lewis-Skelly had to deal with a yellow for most of the second half when he was supposed to come on with a clean slate. Nketiah booked at the end of the first half. I think we managed that pretty well, because the last thing we needed was to give the referee any excuse to even things up. Because I think when you are away from home and when the crowd is baying the way they are, that's an easy thing to happen, right? Only takes a second. And all of a sudden it's 10 versus 10 and the dynamic changes again. I want to just, before we go into the questions part, I do want to talk about Declan Rice a little bit because I think he was really eye-catching against Bayern Munich. What I thought was really interesting about his performance yesterday was how he sort of took some of the stress off the central defensive partnership. Mm-hmm. They haven't played together very much. There is a big onus on them or a big spotlight on them because you're coming in and you're replacing Gabriel and Saliba and everyone's going, well, what are these two guys about? Are they capable of it? Are they up for it physically, technically, all the rest? And I think what Rice really cleverly did for periods of this game was to ensure that they were not stress tested in any real way by sort of dropping between them, always giving them an option on the ball when they had it in possession. And I thought it was maybe came at the expense of what he can bring to the team in the attacking third or in the opposition half, at least, because of the way he carries the ball and drives the ball. But I think there's a sort of measure of, how would you put it? He sacrificed a little bit of his own game in the opposition half to ensure that we didn't fall foul of something in our own half. And I think that was a really... that's a guy taking responsibility. Whether he was instructed or not, I don't know. Could well have been. But I think that was an important aspect of how we managed those two players on yellow cards for so long.
Yeah. I mean, it's more leadership skills demonstrated, isn't it, from Declan Rice. And when we talk about Saliba and Gabriel being out, I think inevitably we focus on their physical presence, their defensive attributes, but they are so important as well in the way the team build up. Mm-hmm. We say Mikel Arteta built this team from the back. So naturally, if you take those pieces out, there is going to be a knock-on effect. And I mentioned David Raya taking a few more risks on the ball in those early stages. And I think that was partly about him taking responsibility too, and not, giving Mosquera and Nketiah difficult situations on the ball in the first few minutes of the game when he probably knew and suspected Chelsea would be after them. So I think Arsenal, they protected that untested defensive unit very, very well, as you would expect. And they came through it strongly, I thought, as a pair. I mean, they both had their moments or their wobbles, but not to any great cost for Arsenal. So, I
mean, it was interesting looking at the stats. Who do you think had the most touches for Arsenal yesterday?
I have no idea.
Right, it's Mosquera.
It's Mosquera.
Mosquera, yeah, and he passed it very well, like 95% pass completion. Rice was next in terms of touches. Mosquera 92 touches, Rice 86, and then Nketiah with 79, which is sort of what you would expect. And it's kind of the same way we would play with Gabriel and Saliba in the team. Against 10 men, the two central defenders have, a lot of the ball. But I think what we know with Gabriel and what we know with Saliba is that they have the experience of the Premier League and the sort of understanding with each other about when maybe to push it a little bit in the opposition half. And I think, I'm not saying those two played it safe. I just think that the inexperience as a duo maybe was evident when we were playing against 10 men in the second half. And I thought, actually, by the way, when Martin Odegaard came on, our press was a lot more effective. We looked a lot more difficult to play through in the second half when Odegaard came on and was organising that press.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I think naturally as well, against a tiring 10 men, that press, we could afford that extra man as well. So, but yeah, it wasn't quite enough. There were moments, late on, that Timber header which took it away from Gyökeres, and
I think he's got to go for it there. Even if Gyökeres is screaming at him, I don't think Timber can get out of the way. We're talking split second stuff here. Merino had a shot, didn't he? The one that Sanchez saved. And then Gyökeres went in. Well, I thought
to get to the rebound.
Was it from Merino? He made a good save in the first half, or was it Martinelli?
I think Martinelli. Yeah. He actually had a decent game, Sanchez. Sod's law, it comes against us, but there you go. So there, 1-1, kind of as you were as regards Chelsea. City had obviously got their late winner on Saturday.
Yeah.
But to be honest, that I'm sure some Arsenal fans were disheartened by that. I'm kind of more heartened by how much hard work they made of it. That gives me more confidence. The fact that it's so nearly 2-2
against a Leeds team who have not been great.
Yeah, big question marks over Daniel Farke, and that City at their imperious best, sweep them aside. Well,
look, it's 1-1 away from home to Chelsea in a London derby. And now we reset. We've got another London derby. And I've got a question about that in part 2. So why don't we take a little break here? We will come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. I did say I had a question about London derbies, didn't I?
Yes.
Wouldn't it have been great if I'd had that lined up and ready to go? Let me find it. I got it. Okay, I've got it. And that the question comes from Prashant, who's at prashant.bsky.social. He says, hello, gents. How significant a role will the London derbies play in the title race? As we've seen with Fulham and Palace, these games are always tightly contested, and Brentford will be no exception. We have a lot of those.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that any London team trying to win a Premier League faces. Our record in London derbies under Mikel Arteta is pretty good. I think I'm right in saying we were kings of London for a second consecutive season last year. We won 7 of our 12 London derbies, 25 points from a possible 36.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, when you think about who those teams are, who was it? Chelsea, Fulham, Brentford, Palace, West Ham, Spurs.
Yeah.
It's not bad at all. We only lost 1 of 12, 3 draws in there. It was maybe a bit of a theme last season. Probably if we could have converted some draws into wins, it might have made a big difference. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge London teams have to face. And I suppose the offset is, well, there's less travel involved. It's not like they're trekking up and down the country. It makes the preparation a little bit easier, matchday planning a little bit easier. But yeah, definitely going to be important. But, you know, we had 2 London derbies this week and drew 1 away, absolutely smashed our local rivals at home. It's not too shabby. Now
another one on Wednesday against Brentford.
Yeah.
Do you have a question maybe about how we might change things there, or?
That's a good question. I don't know if I
think I had one as well.
You can always ask me, Andrew, if you haven't got it to hand.
Yeah, hang on. Let's
see. After all these years.
I know.
Question, I reckon.
I know. Let me have a look and see if I can find one. Okay, here's one from Kevin Essington, who's at citygreenerstrategies.com on Blue Sky. He says, what odds do you think, or do you give, that Norgard will start on Wednesday? Zubimendi needs a breather. It's Norgard's old club, and we should be able to start Odegaard. But I wonder if it might be time to maybe just give Declan Rice a little bit of a rest. Another one, Gunner Forever 07.bsky.social. Do you think Brentford might be a time to rest and rotate a bit? I think Rice and Saka looked a bit tired today, among others. Maybe it's time we give Norgard, White, Madueke, Odegaard and Gyökeres starts. Bearing in mind, of course, that we've got Aston Villa on Saturday lunchtime.
Yeah, I was looking at that Chelsea team and I was thinking about, I think there are 6 players who started all 3 games that week. Timber. 6 outfielders. Raya did, obviously. And then Timber, Zubimendi, Rice, Eze, Saka, Merino.
Yeah.
You would think a few of them would be in line for a rest. And Arteta kind of hinted at that. He said something like, we're going to need everybody.
Well, he always says that, but
he does always say it. Yeah, but I do wonder if it's not just Brentford, is it? It's Villa as well for the weekend, which is a really tough game.
That's it.
So I have to think he's going to be looking to make a few changes, specifically Norgard.
I think Zubimendi could start this game.
Yeah.
Because, he came off
quite
after
early.
Yeah, after an hour, so he'd be well capable of starting, I think, as well. Did we see Mikel Arteta previously want to try Eze and Odegaard together? Was it the game against Forest? Was it the game when Odegaard got injured?
It was the game Odegaard got injured.
Yeah, and he started
saw it for about 20 minutes.
Home game, Eze and Odegaard together. What can they do? Is there scope then maybe to play a Norgard, Eze, Odegaard midfield? Potentially, then you can rest Zubimendi and Rice. You keep these guys on the bench, obviously, so you've got legs to come on. But, I do think this is a game on Wednesday that he does need to use his squad, not just to give us the best chance of winning against Brentford, but also to give us the best chance of going to Villa Park, which is a difficult place for us to go. It has been in recent seasons. And I think if you're thinking about that game and how we could get 3 points there, it's going to be a very high energy game. We're going to have to run with Aston Villa on Saturday. So you want Rice, Zubimendi, Timber, Calafiori. We don't quite know what the state of play will be at centre half yet, but if Saliba can come back in, I think there's scope for quite a bit of change on Wednesday night.
Let me ask you, of those kind of first choice players, the ones who've played a lot of minutes, who are the ones that you're like, I'd love to see them given a rest? I think it would really benefit them. Is it Rice maybe?
Rice, Timber.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Saka. I'm not 100% on that one, but you do have Madueke, for example, who can play there, so you can take some pressure off him. I saw quite a bit of chat about Saka yesterday, and I don't think he had a brilliant game by any means, but I think what he demonstrated with the assist is that he is a player who, in a tight game, has the ability to produce a moment of quality, which you can get you something from a game. So he remains really important. His shooting boots were on the wrong feet, I think. He put a couple way over the bar, didn't he? But maybe I'd think about him.
The fullback ones are interesting because I think Arteta's willingness to make those changes may depend on what he's got in the centre. I would throw the name of Mikel Merino in, actually. He's played so many minutes in the absence of Havertz and Gyökeres.
Yeah.
And I actually would be looking at this week and thinking, I want him to start at Villa Park, probably. Just because we don't quite know where Gyökeres is. I mean, we'll know more after Wednesday night, potentially, if he plays. But I just think the team, as a rule, functions so well with Merino in that role. Yeah.
I mean, do you think it's within the realms of possibility that Wednesday could be like a timeshare for Gyökeres and Jesus? That maybe Gyökeres starts and then 20 minutes to go, you can put Gabriel Jesus on and give him some minutes?
I think so. I'd quite like to see that. And then you find out what you've got there for a start, and then you can make your decision for Saturday. As I said, I think last week, at the moment, I think it's Merino's shirt. But if Victor comes in on Wednesday night and slams in a couple of goals, that quickly change.
Yeah.
And maybe after his performance at the Bridge, maybe Eze would be one that I'd be thinking about. I think Martin Odegaard should start. I think he's had 2 sub-appearances. I think a game at home, this is a great opportunity to give him some minutes that he really needs.
Yeah.
I've got a few questions here. You mentioned Jurrien Timber as a player you'd like to get a rest. We actually had a lot of questions about Ben White.
We did. A lot.
So, like Nikhil, very broadly, just says, hi, gents. Are either of you worried about the lack of game time for Ben White? No filler on Blue Sky says, do you think Ben White has been mismanaged? Arteta is willing to find game time for almost everyone except him. He's too good to never play, and if he doesn't play, he'll want to leave. Moreover, if we never use him, Timber is more likely to get injured, which is the last thing we need. But yeah, I mean, I could have picked any. There are a lot of questions saying, why doesn't Ben White play? What are you thinking about it? Is he going to play in the week? So over to you, Andrew. What do you make of it?
I will say that one of the changes I had thought or would have thought about if I was Mikel Arteta yesterday, if I was making changes at half-time, I would have given consideration to bringing Ben White on for Mosquera and putting Timber in at centre-half. Or indeed Ben White at centre-half. We had some questions about Ben White playing at centre-half, which is, the position he first came to the club in, hasn't really played there a lot over the last little while. I mean, I will say I'm worried because I think we had a discussion maybe a couple of weeks ago about Ben White. And we were finding it a little bit hard to understand why there was a little 3-game run where we were expecting maybe Ben White to get the game in midweek, and he didn't. He got a few minutes, and he got a few minutes against Bayern the other night as well, but that was it. My fear is that physically he's not... that Arteta has some doubts about him physically, because as I said a couple of weeks ago, he cannot have any doubt about the quality of Ben White, the attitude of Ben White, the character of Ben White, the footballing ability of Ben White. So if he's not being picked, does it tell us something about the physicality of Ben White and whether or not he has been really hampered by that injury? I think, there's a good case to be made for him to start on Wednesday against Brentford. I think he's good enough to play for this Arsenal team in the way that Mikel Arteta wants this Arsenal team to play. I recognise that Jurrien Timber has been absolutely sensational this season, and the balance of power now is with him in that right back position. But that doesn't mean that Ben White is a busted flush from a footballing perspective, unless there is something physically wrong with him that we can't use him, or the manager feels like he can't depend on him from the start of a game. I don't know. I find it quite strange because he was one of Mikel Arteta's most trusted lieutenants, wasn't he? And then, as can happen with a player, they find themselves on the periphery of the manager's thoughts. And once you're there, it's kind of hard to get back in,
Yeah, well, it's kind of a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because if they do have concerns over him physically, the one thing that's not going to help that is inactivity. And so if the manager's worried, doesn't play him, he doesn't get sharper necessarily. And then it becomes a question of what sort of game are you prepared to throw him in for? You talk about the midweek game against Bayern Munich. Could he have rotated him in for that one? But it's a huge test against one of the best sides in Europe. And is he in a place where he's able to just seamlessly step in? Probably not, given his protracted absence from the team. So I definitely think there is something there. I, like you, I have my suspicions around a physical issue. We know Ben's had procedures and knee issues and some fairly lengthy layoffs, and there can be kind of collateral to that. I do wonder if, because of that, is centre-half something that might suit him more than having to gallop up and down that right flank. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? He arrived principally as the centre-half for £50 million. But on the way Arteta is picking the team right now, he's not in the first 4 centre-backs. He is the natural second choice at right back. I think this Brentford game surely has got Ben White's name on it.
I'd be really worried if he doesn't play this one, because listen, we can talk about Ben White, but we also, as others have pointed out in their questions, we need to think about Jurrien Timber as well. Yeah. Because, he has played a lot of minutes this season, and, he too was somebody who, was afflicted by injury, not just the big one that he had in his first season, but last season too, where at the end of the season, didn't he have an operation?
Mm-hmm.
He did.
Yeah, he did have it. He did, yeah, you're right. He was late back, wasn't he, for pre-season this season?
Yeah. And then you look at the minutes so far this season, only Declan Rice has played more minutes, outfield minutes, than Jurrien Timber.
But one thing we can say, I think, at this point, after however many years of Mikel Arteta, is that once he does have that doubt or that uncertainty around picking a player, it can be difficult for that player, can't it? I mean, we've seen that pattern play out many times. I'm not saying that is quite where Ben is yet, but I think that's probably what's giving us all something to talk about here, is that we've seen Mikel lose faith, feels strong, but get into a position with certain players where he's maybe reluctant.
He said something either in the pre-game press conference or pre-Bayern maybe. He said something, about, he was asked about Ben White and the minutes he's playing or not playing. And he said something about, like, he's got to earn it.
Yeah.
He's got to earn, and it's like, I thought that was a little odd, you know? I mean, he did say, like everybody else, he's got to earn it, etc., and blah, blah. But it felt a little off to me. It just didn't quite sound right to me, the way he talked about Ben White, as if, you know, he needed to be convinced by what Ben White can bring to this team on the pitch, when, you know, we've seen since he arrived from Brighton what a great player he is and how committed he is and how willing he is to sort of, you know, play through the pain and, you know, do everything that Mikel Arteta wants from a player. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess Wednesday will tell us something.
I think as well we have to acknowledge that Jurrien Timber's performances have taken him into a sort of tier of selection that he wasn't necessarily previously in. I think he's now, as much as Saliba or Gabriel, an automatic pick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, I just dropped something off my desk.
Just frustration at not getting to look at beautiful Ben White enough.
It's my picture of Ben White in his Speedos. Just knocked it over out of sadness.
But, you know, we've got to give Timber his dues as well. But we want to keep him there. We want to keep him fit and protected, and Ben White is probably our best way of doing that.
Yeah. What about this for a question from 1.76 acres? And he says, what would the narrative be if Arsenal had gone down to 10 men at home against an opponent in first place, drew, but cost themselves a chance to cut the gap to the leaders? Why are Chelsea being showered with praise when their indiscipline is likely to cost them dearly? Why is today being portrayed by many as a referendum on a weakened Arsenal and not the home club, second place club, that really needed to win but played violently to their own detriment?
That's interesting. I mean, I would say actually I've seen sort of both teams given a fair amount of credit coming out of this. I've not ingested loads of media around it, but I think it's one of those where Chelsea can feel like, well, we held out for a draw with 10 men. We played pretty well. Equally, Arsenal can say, we came from behind, we avoided defeat, we maintain our lead over Chelsea. So I feel like the narrative that I've observed has kind of been quite favourable for both sides, which is quite an unusual thing in a big game. You know, usually there's like clear winners and losers. I suppose when it's a draw, that helps.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why? What do you think?
I think we all sort of consume the media through our own prism in a way, you know. But I did see some headlines and stuff, you know, about Chelsea. You know, they've shown their title contenders because they played like that with 10 men. You know, the flip side of that, of course, is like they were on top and the better team with 11 versus 11. So are they too emotional? Are Chelsea too emotional? Maybe, you know?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think what they really needed yesterday was a win. I think that could have really ignited their season in a potentially quite exciting way for them. I think they'll be frustrated too, sending off the way things played out. I mean, this is kind of tangential question from Joseph Nathan. And Joseph says, are you concerned about our performance in the last 2 away games? Both draws and far from the performances we've got used to. Big atmosphere and physical opposition is what we're going to go up against as we challenge for the title. Is this the first crack in the armour of an inexperienced team?
I don't think you can call us an inexperienced team for a start. I really don't think you can do that. Listen, I think we probably did enough to win at Sunderland. You know, in terms of what we did in that game, when you look at how we played, 17 shots in that game to 6. I think we close to 2 XG to their 0.5 XG. We got caught by a late sucker punch, right? And that changes the way people talk about that game. You know, it was a point away from home, but if we win that game, people will be saying, look, Arsenal stood up to Sunderland's aggressive, direct approach and still had what it took to win that game. I think yesterday felt maybe like a bit of an outlier in terms of our recent performances. I've seen a couple of questions. Let me see if I can get one here. Peebs on the Discord says, what do you make of this team's inability to go away to its title rivals and win? As great as we've been this season, it would be lovely to add that string to our bow. You know, this was a game which I think we've tried to give the right context to in terms of explaining the way Arsenal didn't perform and didn't reach the levels that they can. The Liverpool game, I think that's just like we got caught on the day. It was a very even game. And they produced one moment which won it for them. Have we played any other title rivals away from home? No. So, listen.
Obviously
Sunderland, yeah. They're in the top 4, aren't they? Or they're thereabouts. Yeah. I just think sometimes you're going to have a bad day or an indifferent day. Bad is losing. A point is not what we wanted, but not the worst in the world. But I think it's probably the sample size is too small this season in terms of games against so-called title rivals to really draw any conclusions. So,
and I stopped short of saying we were bad yesterday. Like I think we were. The word I used was average. You know, I thought we were a way off where we have been for the most of the season. Whether we were actively bad, I'm not so sure. I think you've got to remember the context. You've got to remember who you're playing. You've got to remember what you've already done that week. You've got to remember who you're without. All these things contribute. There are quite a lot of parallels between the Chelsea and Sunderland games in terms of the physicality, maybe the types of goal we conceded as well. Do I think it's sort of setting a precedent? Not particularly. I think my main sort of what I'm grieving from the game, which is an overstatement. I'm not grieving it. But I did have that feeling going in that Arsenal had the chance to sort of really, really, really deliver a hammer blow to their rivals by winning there. You know, like I think had we won yesterday, what would we be looking at? Would it be 9 points from Chelsea, 8 from Man City, or 7 from Man City? I think even the most cautious of Arsenal fans would have to have said at that point in time, we would be very clearly in the driving seat.
Sure.
And I kind of wanted us. Well, I wanted us to do that. I wanted it because I sort of thought, yeah, to the question's point, going away to these grounds is maybe a bit of a gap on the CV in terms of going and delivering those knockout blows in their backyard.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to kind of shut people up by winning at Stamford Bridge and winning at the Etihad and romping on home to the title. But Premier League titles are rarely that simple. Andrew.
That's true. That's true. Arteta said afterwards, overall, it's been a really positive week because the difficulty has been immense. But I have this flavour that today we should have won the game and we haven't. That's a learning point for me. So no sort of obscuring the fact that this was a missed opportunity. And I know exactly what you're talking about. But I do think that, there are going to be games where it doesn't work out for you, where you don't play well, where the changes off the bench don't particularly make an impact, which I think was the case yesterday. It was two players who started the game who got us the point, in Saka and Merino, and the substitutes didn't really have the kind of influence that we want. But, I also think that a poor performance from Arsenal was, not that it was overdue, but we haven't really had one for for a good while, Yeah. If you look at the games that we've played, let me just get these up here. Like, we haven't lost since the end of August, and we won 10 in a row, then won the next two. So this is a team that is, at this moment in time, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 games unbeaten. And in that time, we've beaten Newcastle away. We've beaten Atletico Madrid. We've beaten Tottenham. We've beaten Bayern Munich. We've gone away to Athletic Club and we've drawn with Manchester City. And for the most part, I think people have been really, really encouraged by the way that Arsenal play, the way we've responded to setbacks, the way we've dealt with absences and injuries. I mean, there's going to be a day where it kind of catches up with you a little bit. And I think yesterday was that day.
Totally agree. And as I say, when you have that day, don't lose. And that's where we're at. So not too shabby.
Not too shabby. Do you have anything else? I think let me ask you this one just to finish.
Okay.
Because we do have to get this out. We're delayed recording and there's other stuff to do today as well. Elizabeth on the Discord said, the commentator in the US said he didn't think Arteta would like Nketiah laughing in Pedro Neto's face. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't think that's true. I think Mikel probably loves that aspect of Nketiah's character.
I agree.
That would be my assumption.
I thought it was interesting as well, wasn't it? Because when he got up and when he got in the face of Pedro Neto, it was Christian Mosquera who came over. Like, Mosquera's the youngest guy in the team, basically, apart from Lewis Skelly and Waneri, and he wasn't on the pitch. So Mosquera sort of recognised the moment for what it was and let him do it for a couple of seconds and then said, listen, we've got a corner to defend here. Get yourself back, get yourself organised, concentrate on this, and let's defend this one properly, especially because we conceded. So I think when Arteta looks back at that moment, he'll have a good laugh at Nketiah doing that, and I don't think he'll have any issue with it whatsoever. But I also think he'll look at the behaviour of Christian Mosquera too and be really, really encouraged that a young player was sort of that in the game. It's the sort of thing you expect from a more senior player, isn't it?
Yes, and in personality terms, they are sort of reminiscent of Gabriel and Saliba.
Yeah, it's true, actually, yeah.
In terms of the balance of that partnership. Nketiah clearly is sort of a more emotional character than Mosquera. I've got to say, Simon Collins sent me this tweet by Alex, who's at AlexFRCo on X, which really made me laugh, which said, great tackle, but Nketiah makes me nervous. Feels like watching a dog drive your car perfectly. They're driving perfectly, but they're still a dog. I want to read more football analysis like that.
That's what we want. What kind of a dog?
Yeah, I know exactly. And weirdly, I know exactly what he means.
Yeah, it's a good observation, to be fair. Anyway, it's a good point at which to leave it. And obviously there is a game against Brentford, which we will have a preview podcast for tomorrow. There's a press conference, I assume, with Mikel Arteta.
9:30.
9:30 tomorrow morning. Okay, so we'll have a preview podcast tomorrow afternoon. We'll also be rounding up all the weekend's Premier League action in an episode of The 30. Fun goings on at White Hart Lane and beyond. So we'll talk about all that. If you want to get on board with our Patreon, you can join at patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, folks, thanks for being with us. Thanks for listening as always. And we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.